And we're on. We are here with Meghan Telpner from MeghanTelpner.com. And we just wanted to have a discussion with Meghan today about her condition. And of course, she has an extremely, really cool website. So if you get a chance to go on there, it's really neat. But we just want to kind of talk about your successes, your struggles in the beginning, and then your successes with Crohn's, because you found out, I guess, on your travels through the world, you started having some digestive issues and kind of contracted, or was diagnosed with Crohn's. But my first question was, of course, going through your website and seeing some of your videos and things like that. I was just, my first question is, are you always this happy?
You know what? A lot of people ask me that, and I'd say 95% of the time I am. I mean, I don't sit at my computer smiling all day while I'm working, but I don't get ruffled that easily. And I definitely wasn't always this content, that's for sure. I mean, I don't think that typically people who get any condition of inflammation are usually not sort of the easy breezy, relaxed type of person. It's usually the type A. So I work against that, or rather, I work with it ongoing, especially running my own business and doing all that I'm doing. But I know that so many of the times in the past where I've let things upset me, in the long run, they didn't mean anything and they weren't worthwhile. Um, you know, family stuff, relationship stuff, that's always challenging. But like work stuff, the stuff that's out there, I just leave it out there and try not to let it interfere too much.
That's good. That's
So
right.
yeah, most of the time I am happy.
Well, that's good. I don't know. I've been told I've got one of those kind of faces that's naturally just, I'm really happy on the inside, but I don't always look that way. So I get a lot of grief sometimes because people are like, why do you look so mad? I'm like, well, I'm not mad. I'm just, my
Yeah.
resting face is a mean face, I guess.
A line in my creed is smile at strangers. And I just think, if it can become contagious. It's like if you wear a smile long enough, that becomes your natural face.
All right. That's good. So, all right. So there you go. Answer number one, you are really actually that happy. Okay.
Yeah.
So, anyways, just kind of go back. I know reading through some of your story, and I didn't find too much of it on your website, so it didn't seem like you really go into that much detail on your website. You mentioned that you had some issues for about 3 years or so, I believe, before
Yeah.
you were actually diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So, if you could you kind of help us understand what happened during that 3 years? I know you saw several doctors at that time, and
Yeah.
were they just not able to pin it, or just they didn't know what was going on, or how did all that kind of
It
transpire?
all happened. Well, first of all, I don't get into too much detail on my website about my disease because what I realized in getting well, which I'm sure we'll get to, is that it's not specific to any one condition, this sort of path towards total health. It can apply to anything, and we all get sick sort of based on where our weakest genetic link is in our body. That's one part of it. There are a couple of posts about it. And I just got my book yesterday. The first chapter of my book actually outlines my entire story
Oh, really?
um, of how I developed it. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
Undone it. But so what happened was it was in the summer of 2003 and I graduated from university and was I had a degree in fashion and was like, I just got a degree in the most shallow thing on earth. What am I going to do with it? So I went to Africa because that seemed to make some kind of sense. What happened before I left was I got shot full of about 5 vaccinations in one day. About a week later, I got so sick. My life has never been the same since. And now looking back on it, though the medical community would probably, sue me over saying that a vaccination could trigger an autoimmune disease, there's a lot of research that alludes to the fact that that is very possible. So after I got those vaccinations, I just wasn't feeling well, and I was traveling through Africa and continually getting quite sort of sick to my stomach. And I came home after about 3 months and started this tour of doctors because something was wrong, and they were saying that it was travel induced IBS or stress or hormones or any number of things, and my symptoms were not so extreme. It's like I mean, looking back, I could say that I was having mild flare-ups ongoing where I'd be fine for a couple weeks and then spend 24 hours very, very sick, and then it would sort of repeat that process. So I was going to so many doctors, and it was almost the problem that I wasn't sick enough to get a diagnosis. I didn't have a lot of the severe symptoms that people have. I didn't have extreme fever. I didn't have any very scary bleeding at that point. But I had the symptoms, I guess, of a very severe IBS. So over the course of 3 years, however, I kept trying to modify my diet, and I think that helped to slow the progression of the disease, and that I didn't have like a rapid, like often people's first experience with it is a hospitalization with, explosive bloody mucousy diarrhea where they're like, what is this? I didn't have that experience. Mine was more slower to progress, where by May, June of 2006, so now almost a full 3 years later and 19 doctors, I did have a severe flare-up where, in the span of 30 days, I'd lost like 15 or 20 pounds, and I'm naturally a pretty small person. So it's a significant weight loss, and finally got in to get the colonoscopy. And it was one of those things where I went to the medical system in Canada is different than the US, in that we don't directly have to pay for it out of our pocket. We pay for it in our taxes. But I went to about 5 different general practitioners to get referrals to a gastroenterologist just to see which one would come up first, because here you could wait up to 6 months to see a specialist. So that was sort of May, June. In August was when I had a full colonoscopy and the subsequent diagnosis. And so that was sort of how it went. And I was given my treatment options. They recommended some medications, and I didn't feel confident that that was the solution for me.
Okay, so you mentioned you don't really go that much into it on your website because you feel that everyone's path to healing is different. Is that and
No, I feel that there's 2 reasons why I don't go into it that much on my website. I think that one is that for me to say that I am healed, or I'm not allowed to use the word cured, because apparently there's no cure for this.
right?
It creates a response in people who are still suffering that I don't ever want to induce in anyone. I don't want anyone to feel like they've, failed because they didn't get better or anything like that. And, Crohn's and colitis foundations don't support fully the path that I took. And so I try to keep the politics out of it and really just encourage people that they can get healthy. So the fact is that I do believe that the path to health for everyone involves the very same components. The specifics of it might be different. Like a food that might be very healing to me may not be the right exact food for you, or a specific stress reduction practice that works really effectively may not be the right one for you. But there are basic components that we need for health. And it falls into, I always explain it as like a 5-step process. The first and foremost is our attitude, and having that positive attitude, because it takes the edge off the corners. And, we don't get cut, and we don't get hurt, and we don't experience the stress in the same capacity. And then we have our lifestyle practices, which is, how much we're eating, and how much we're sleeping, and how much we're drinking, and and drinking, I mean hydration, or vice versa, or the flip side is how much, health depleting things we're drinking. Who we're living with, who we're choosing to share life with, how much we love the people we're choosing to love, and that whole lifestyle component. That those 2 aspects alone, we really do have a lot of control over how we engage in the world around us. The third component becomes our diet and the foods that we choose to eat. And we're fortunate that many of us have that luxury to choose the foods that we eat. And unfortunately, we're making choices based on very strange things, like how cheap it is, how easy it is, how fast it is. And I would say, imagine if you chose your dates the same way. Why do we choose our food, something that's going to nourish our body, the way we might choose, one night of fun, cheap, easy, and convenient? So there's that component. And then we look towards, supplements if we need them. to support and build up, the therapeutic components of nutrition in our cells. And then when those four components aren't serving us, then we go towards the medication as the fifth step. And the challenge we have is that most of us are approaching our health conditions in the complete reverse order, where we're first going with medicines, then we're going with supplements, then diet, then lifestyle. When none of that works, we get sent to a shrink to get a medication that will ideally numb us of feeling what we're feeling. So that's where I sort of stress that the path to healing, whether you've got Crohn's or colitis or rheumatoid arthritis or chronic yeast infections, whatever it might be, there's certain steps that you need to take no matter what it is for full health. And what we fail to realize is being healthy isn't that, I haven't had a flare up in 6.5 years, because I hadn't had a flare up in, the 25 years before that. But had I been healthy before? No, I was fine. But what we often forget and fail to acknowledge is that health is this abundance of things. It's not the lack of disease. It's having this vitality and this great attitude and waking up being like, yes, it's going to be an awesome day, and all those things that we're lacking because so many of us are just exhausted. We don't like our jobs. We feel stressed by finances or by relationships or by family, and that contributes to building our health or building disease in our body. And everything that we do, from the thoughts that we think to the water we drink, is either going to build our health or build our disease. And that's sort of the choice that we have to make and figure out how to work with our current state.
Oh, it's interesting. You kind of go back to you mentioned the eating part, and that's something, of course, being in the South and specifically in Louisiana, the organic, trend is not fully caught on, at least in the area where I am, and of course everything. And if it is organic, then they'll fry it. So that just
Right.
And it's funny because any times that I'm in a discussion with somebody, like you said, they're like, well, it's so much more expensive, and at the same time they're overweight, and they're saying I need to get healthy, and just spend a little extra on the organic food versus usually my argument is, I mean, you have nice clothes usually, and you spend money on how you look on the outside and things of that nature, but really all that, like you said, happiness, I agree with you 100%, it comes from the inside.
Something that's really challenging for people who are dealing with health problems and saying, I don't want to spend that extra time in the kitchen, or I don't want to spend that extra money on that good food, is partly that when you're not healthy, your thoughts are different. And where, if you don't feel good all the time, and one thing that brings you happiness is that bowl of ice cream at the end of the day, the thought of giving that up is not just giving up ice cream. It's like an emotional thing. It's like, this is bringing me some bit of joy in the day. Or, people who have chronic pain and just want new clothes or new shoes because that helps their body feel better. It's hard for them to see clearly how there's other ways to approach it. So instead of, doing it as an external thing, we approach it as an internal thing. And then your thoughts around these things start to change, where you're like, wait a second, I didn't need that. I know that I buy those shoes, I'm going to look great tonight, but or those great jeans, what good is it when they're hanging in my closet and I'm too sick to get out of bed to wear them? So that's something that is really hard, especially for individuals who are on a path to health, and then they look around them at all these other people and they're like, why are you doing this? It's hard to get that thought process in place when you're in a different cycle. It's a really challenging thing to switch over. And I'm guilty of it personally. When I was sick and doctors kept saying, you're too stressed and you need to quit your job and this and that, and all I wanted to do was shop, and I spent a lot of time getting my hair done and those things, because that gave me instant gratification. To me, it seemed that switch to getting healthy would be a lot of work, which, I mean, it wasn't easy, but the alternatives for me were far scarier, and that was the motivation.
So did you always eat healthful, or was it from the when you got the condition that you really took a notice of it?
I would say that most people would say I always ate healthy. but I always, whenever someone says like, yeah, I eat pretty well, I know they don't. Like, there's a different definition of it. Like, I never ate fast food. I mean, as a kid, like once in a while, like a trip to a fast food restaurant or for a kid, someone's birthday party. We never had fast food as a family. We never had soda in the fridge. We never had junk cereals, which I think are the cornerstones of a lot of problems, specifically in America with obesity and the situation with kids' health as well. But I also was not eating brown rice or knew anything about what a sprout was, or I didn't know how to cook, quite honestly. And I didn't learn how to cook until I was about, I guess, 26, just after I was diagnosed, and was like, I started my healing process by doing a ton of research. And I'd read about a food that was potentially healthful for us, that would help heal the intestinal lining. And I'd read about a food that was harmful that could potentially cause a risk to it. And I put my food on two categories and only ate what was on the potentially healthful side. And at that point, like, I had never eaten kale before. I didn't know what quinoa was. I didn't pronounce it. And it's quinoa, it's not quinoa. But I had to learn. And that was sort of what the creative part of my healing journey was learning how to take these foods that are supposedly healthy for me and make them delicious, because no one wants to eat food that tastes like crap. And that was how I learned to cook. And I started my business, and I actually taught my first in-person cooking class in May, I think it was May or June of 2008. And that class was with my very first 6 recipes that I had created. It was really the only 6 things I knew how to make at that point. That was after nutrition school. And I just built it from there, just by playing in my kitchen. The more I learn, the more I create, and realize that, I'm not a trained chef by any means. But I realized that by starting with really good ingredients, you don't have to do a lot to them to make them taste good. And when you get the processed chemicals, everything that's so saturated in iodized, bleached table salt, refined sugar, which is more addictive than cocaine, and vinegars, and these, all this refinement out of the diet, real food actually starts to amazingly delicious. Where I used to take my apples and have to dip them in honey, now a whole apple sometimes seems too sweet for me. And I know I'm at the full far end of the spectrum, and I'm a little bit kooky in the way that I live. That was a choice that I made. But your taste buds legitimately and genuinely change and readapt themselves to what's a natural flavor that we get from nature.
I agree with you 100% because, like I said, my wife was from Seattle, and we met a couple of years ago. And I mean, I thought I ate healthful until I met someone from the Northwest, and then she introduced me. She introduced me really to organic and gluten free. And I would say gluten free was one of the biggest changes for me. I mean, it was instantaneous as far as how much better I felt. I was already eating light meals and things like that because everything always just made me feel so full and bloated for hours on end. And I thought it was just like a carb thing, which, well, apparently it was. But the breads, the white breads, and things like that. And when she introduced me to that, and especially, and she cooks as well. She cooks. I mean, we eat all meal, at home, and it's unbelievable. I mean, she has really spoiled and ruined restaurants for me almost to a certain extent because, and I'm not talking about the very, very nice ones, but, just your average everyday restaurant that you would go into, and I would used to sit down and think, oh, this is pretty good. I can't do it anymore. Now, I haven't eaten fast food in 2 years, and but I was also one that if I was going to have fast food, I thought maybe Chick-fil-A was the more healthy version. and, yeah, but I mean, so I haven't stopped there at all for 2 years, and you're right, my taste buds have adapted, and I'm a food snob now because of eating.
I think it's being selective. And I think that we have a right to be very selective about the fuel we're going to use to put into our own tank.
Mhm.
You can spend more money a week on the gas for their car than on the food for themselves, and you can get a new car. Like, you can't, like, this is what we got.
Yeah. Well, that I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit because you made some interesting points that I wanted to ask you about. The vaccines from going to Africa. You just made a light bulb go off on my head because I acquired my colitis whenever I was in Iraq with the military, and of course I think we've probably got about 20 vaccines in one day before heading over there. Now I didn't have any reactions or get sick like you did, but as soon as I got to Iraq, that's where I started noticing symptoms and having troubles. And I thought, at first I thought, well, it's just I'm halfway around the world. It's just the climate change, and I just wonder now if that had something to play into it.
Well, at the time, I didn't make that connection, but it was through the course of nutrition school and going to these conferences and all the research I was doing that when a vaccine goes into your body, you're essentially stimulating your immune system to build up antibodies against whatever you're being vaccinated for. But an autoimmune condition it's a genetic mutation that predisposes certain people to autoimmune conditions, and that number is rising dramatically, and a lot of it has to do with the GMOs in our food and all these other components. So if you're predisposed to an autoimmune condition and you get shot full of vaccinations that ramp up your immune system to start creating more antibodies and start fighting off what we were injected with autoimmune, it doesn't know when to back down. So you combine that with stress, which is another trigger for an immune response, and suddenly your immune system's in overload. And with autoimmune, as I'm sure you know, and a lot of your viewers know, it starts to recognize your own tissues as foreign and build antibodies up against it and starts to attack your own tissues. So when your immune system's in overdrive, which a vaccination would do, and you don't have that signal telling, that army, you're familiar with the metaphor, telling that army to, pull the tanks back, and it just keeps shooting, you're left with a mess. So I can't say if vaccinations trigger autoimmune disease, but I can speculate that it's definitely a contributing factor for many people, as are a lot of things like antibiotics and birth control, and there's a lot of things. And there's an interesting documentary and book by Jeffrey Smith about GMOs, how there's been a direct relationship to the increase in genetic modified organisms in our diet with the increase in autoimmune conditions. I think the study starts in 1992 when the GMOs were actually introduced into the North American food supply.
Okay, interesting. So you also mentioned supplementation. So
Yeah.
would you mind being a little bit more specific about, do you supplement anything in particular, or do you feel that if you eat organic or something of that nature that you can get everything you need from the food you eat?
I would like to think that I can get everything I need from the food, but my health has shown me otherwise. I eat as clean, as fresh, as local as possible, but I mean, I'm in Toronto, it's January right now, I'm not eating fresh lettuce out of the ground. So I supplement at different times of the year, and I supplement completely based on what I'm feeling. So under times of stress, I will take, mushroom extract. I will take a vitamin C supplement. I usually take probiotics sort of ongoing. So there's certain things I take depending on. I think the biggest mistake people make with supplements is they're like, I got a cold, I'm going to start taking this, and now I've got a rash, so I'm going to take this, and they just keep building. So they're taking like 25 supplements, don't know what any of them are doing anymore. And the biggest mistake we make is we go to the health food store, we ask them, the person working there, what to take, and we take it for. I don't believe, I think that a great multivitamin ongoing can be really good, but it can also be a Band-Aid. I personally like the approach of, I see a nutritionist, because even nutritionists need nutritionists, and I get put on a therapeutic program usually for 8 weeks at a time, and I go through that whole program. So I'm taking supplements at a much higher dose than what it says on the bottle, and saturating my body and saturating my tissue so that the supplements can actually heal. because that's when supplementation works. Before we're in a state when things are sort of subclinical, they can work when we're in a disease state as well, but because I'm working on the prevention method at this point, so I do this every so often to maintain my health, and it's costly. It's costly to take a lot of supplements, but I'm also not wasting my money on it by seeing a practitioner who can give me, the right 5 supplements I need for that 8-week span in the right quantities to have the effect that I want. And I mean, at this point, I'm 6.5 years, 100% symptom free from a disease that I was told has no cure. The food is a huge component, and you cannot replace a good diet with a handful of pills. That's important to note too. The only people I say it's okay to do supplements for, if you're not going to eat well, is kids in college, because they're not going to eat well for the most part. So a supplement can be really helpful. But once we're, cooking our own meals and doing all that, that has to come first, and then we take on the supplements. And that's why I actually teach what I teach, which is the food component, because if you're not eating properly and figuring out how you're going to plan your meals and when you're going to sit down and eat them and how you're going to prep your vegetables and make it easy and delicious, there's not much you can do to have total health, which is what my book's about.
Okay, good. Well, in your
So I do like supplements, but I think that, going to your local, in the States, it's, Walgreens. Here we have Shoppers Drug Mart, whatever it is, and buying, the generic $5 supplement pill, you're mostly getting genetically modified corn and soy and fillers and artificial sweeteners and colorants, that you're better off not taking that at all and taking something like that.
All right. So does your nutritionist have her own or his own special blend that they help you with, or do they recommend you to certain products?
The person I go to, his name is Josh Catalis. He was so good that I married him.
Oh.
I met him in nutrition school about 7 years ago, and we got married just this past summer. But he works in such a way where he does a full customized intake, and he doesn't represent. He's now formulating some of his own supplements for the sole purpose of. There's regulations in Canada about specific supplements, how many can be in certain capsules and all that. So he's doing this for his clients to alleviate a lot of the costs that we have with bringing stuff in. But he works with all different brands, which I think is really something to look for in a practitioner. If they're recommending to you like, oh, you've got this, well, look, I've got all the products you need right here, because there's a 50% markup on supplements typically, right. 50 to 100. So I like that he chooses specific supplements that from different companies, because different companies have their key product that some of them are really, really great in certain categories, but they may not have great products across the line, which is why I don't sell any one brand of anything. I like to have the best of the best for that specific product, and that might mean multiple brands.
Okay. All right. And then as far as your probiotic, do you stick to a certain brand on that, or do you change it up quite a bit, or?
I changed. I mean, probiotics are expensive. So typically I take them as if, people take a course of antibiotics when they're not feeling well. I'll take a course of probiotics where I'll get a bottle, a strong one. I can't even tell you the numbers because it's not my specific area of specialty. But I'll take them, twice a day or 3 times a day until the bottle's finished. So sort of to re-inoculate my gastrointestinal tract with the good guys to help support my immune system. A lot of people get a probiotic and they take like 1 or 2 here and there, and they work the most effectively when you can build it up and keep the momentum going. Okay. So a couple things to look for in a probiotic. They should be the ones that are kept in the fridge. I'm not a big fan of the shelf-stable ones. Right. Should be in capsules, so there's a powder within that capsule, right. Not solid. Most supplements, I don't like the solid ones because you can often see them in your poop, especially if you have digestive issues. We're already at a deficiency with our digestive abilities. So the ones that are kept in the fridge, and you often truly get what you pay for with a probiotic.
So let me ask you this, and I know you're not a practicing physician, so I'll try to word this carefully. But I say hypothetically, I take a probiotic once a day because it's required once a day, and it is capsule and powder form and in the fridge. Are you saying if you were hypothetically me, that instead of taking that once a day, you would take two or three and speed that process up and then be done with it for a month or two or three or
Well, I legitimately can't give that advice.
Mhm.
Um, but I can tell you a couple things. One is that I think that medical physicians are great for offering medical advice. And I think that nutritionists or naturopaths or natural health coaches are really great at offering nutritional advice. So that's the first differentiation. So often doctors will recommend specific supplements, and I know there's a huge shift in the States with doctors, and there's the Institute of Functional Medicine that's teaching doctors about therapeutic nutrition, which is amazing. Um, but I also, uh, I think that you need to go to people who are experts in their specific field to get the right recommendations. So um, I legitimately and legally cannot say that everyone should go and look at their supplement bottle and take three times what it says, but I think that everybody needs to have, if you've got, a dentist on your team and a doctor on your team and a hairdresser on your team, and, we have people that we go to for their area of expertise, that someone in the natural health field who's amazing should also be on that team. And that person who's amazing doesn't require you to come in every month and buy a whole new spectrum of supplements. That person will meet with you up front for a chunk of time, get your history, give you some recommendations, work with you for, 8 weeks or 6 months, and then you should be good. You should probably go for an annual checkup like you would with any other practitioner, or every 6 months. But I'm a little bit wary of the practitioners where you're going in every, 3 weeks and getting a whole new list of supplements to take, and you keep working on different things, because that might be an indication that you're not getting better. And granted, the healing process does take time and does take a lot of commitment, but most of the work is on us, not on seeing a practitioner.
Okay, fair enough. So can I ask you about your undiet habits and that would that led you to remission? I would say remission. And quickly, did you find anything work in particular? I mean, and I'm sure you probably talk about this in your book, and I'm going to suspect you're a proponent, like you said, of what you said, organic, fresh, local,
Yeah.
gluten free. Are you into the gluten free aspect? And then kind of your thoughts on dairy. I mean,
I'm gluten free. Uh, with dairy, dairy's a variable beast. So I prefer not to put a label on my eating habits. So people often assume I'm vegan or I'm vegetarian or I'm raw or I'm macrobiotic or whatever.
no,
And I
you're
think
undiet, right?
diet, I'm just eating food. So with dairy, I highly and strongly and affirmatively recommend people never touch conventional dairy. Like, that's non-organic milk, ice cream, cheese, any of that. There is nothing that's going to benefit us. There's a huge correlation between IBD and lactose intolerance, for one. The other problem is the casein, the protein in the dairy that's so processed, is incredibly tough on the digestive system. With that being said, if you are able to get raw milk, it's completely illegal in Canada. People get arrested for selling raw milk. Raw milk is a different kind of food. It's got all of the good bacteria intact. It's got the enzymes needed to digest it. It's got the proteins in a healthy balance. It's a different food. It's like comparing I don't even know, like a typical white sandwich bread with like a stone ground sourdough, whatever. Like, they're different foods. So a
And
raw,
it's illegal. That's amazing.
it's, yeah. So raw milk from cow, raw milk from goat can be very helpful. It's very nutrient dense, highly absorbable, which we like when we're healing. Um, raw milk based cheeses can also be good. And again, all of that should be organic. I don't think anyone's getting, hormone antibiotic raw milk anyway. So, but for the most part, if you eliminate dairy and you eliminate gluten and cut back severely on your sugar, it's amazing how quickly the body can start to get better. The digestive tract, the cells of the digestive tract replace themselves every 3 days. So, right? I see that
Could you
eyebrow.
say that again?
The cells of the digestive tract replace themselves every 3 days.
Okay. Wow.
The entire body's a new body after every 7 years. The bones
So we
take long.
shed from the inside?
Yeah, that's part of in our poo. True. Um, so there's no reason. So what's really cool about food is that you do start to feel better pretty quickly when you stop aggravating the system. Um, so that's my thoughts on dairy. The other components of my diet, again, I eat completely whole food where I'd say 99% of the processing of the food that I eat happens in my own kitchen. So with that, I know exactly what I'm eating. So I'm not having additives and preservatives. I'm not eating any weird genetically modified oils or oils that have been processed into butter-like substances. I'd sooner eat butter or ghee, which is a clarified butter and is incredibly healing to the gut lining, and it doesn't have that lactose component because it's essentially just the fat from milk products. I eat a lot of fat. The good fats, the omega-3s, some sources of saturated fats, plant-based saturated fats, predominantly the monounsaturated, all that fat. The cells of our intestinal tract feed on good fat. They're like the fuel for it. So that's really key. I eat a lot of mucilaginous foods. And those are foods that are slimy. They have like a snotty consistency. Like aloe, inside of aloe has that. Irish moss, when it's soaked and simmered, has that. When you soak chia seeds, they get that gelatinous. When you can simmer a teaspoon of flax seeds with a cup of water, and it makes a really beautiful mucilaginous tea that you can sip on that's very soothing and healing. So that's part of my diet. I do eat some fish. I would eat eggs if I could. I'm allergic to eggs. So it really varies with the season. In the summer, I eat a lot more raw food than I do in the winter. And I eat a lot of smoothies. I have a ton of fresh vegetable juices. I drink a lot of water, a lot of herbal tea. Um, I eat a lot, and I eat a lot of different food. And people often like, you don't eat bread, you don't eat cheese. What's left? Or like, I don't eat pasta, I don't eat pizza. But it's almost easier for me to say what I don't eat than what I do eat, because I eat a full spectrum of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, lentils, legumes, beans. Some lean animal-based foods. Very selective about them, that they're coming from clean sources when I do eat them, and I eat them in very small amounts, which is all any of us would need anyway. I eat fermented foods like kimchi and sauerkraut, pickles, miso, that kind of stuff. And I just eat very basic, clean, fresh food. But in terms of what my day is actually like, which I think was your part of your original question, sort of the undiet habits, a lot of it isn't even diet. I meditate twice a day for 20 minutes. I exercise daily, whether it's, at a minimum, my 25-minute walk to work and back each day. I try and go to yoga 3 or 4 times a week. I ride my bike everywhere. I don't like the gym, so I don't go to a gym. I think that a lot of us get stuck in this thinking that we need to do an exercise that's really gonna have some kind of, like, we have to sweat really hard for it to be effective. And most of us, especially with an inflammatory disease, need very restorative exercise that's going to lower our overall cortisol and our internal inflammation. I try and get at least 8 hours of sleep a night, if not more, when I have the time. And I don't I don't go to social events out of obligation. So I sort of cut off the people that I didn't feel were not, I don't want to say serving me, but that I felt good being around. I think there's a big thing with energy, and I want to be around people that I felt were really positive and uplifting and doing great things in their life, whether, it wasn't about us eating the same diet, but just that they were creative or inspired or supportive. So I keep my distance from the people that are like, I don't know what you think you're doing with your life, or, why are you eating that way? You make it so difficult, or so that's all part of these undiet habits, which is, again, it goes back to the very first thing you asked me was about happiness. I try and do the things that feel right for my body. And if, I'm craving something, I will eat it. And craving something isn't having, a frozen brownie mix or something, but, doing the things that feel good for me. And I also work a lot. I work a ton of hours every day, and I like it. And it's finding that balance and finding those things that nourish you. And my work, for the most part, nourishes me. So I spend a lot of time on that too.
That's awesome. No, it
My
really is.
long-winded answer. I did want to comment though. You'd mentioned you mentioned about my being in remission, and I'm on a search to find out what this word means. Because again, it's been 6.5 years. There's no cure, they say, for Crohn's or colitis. But with cancer, when you're 5 years in remission, they consider that cured. So I'm trying to figure out what this word remission actually means, because what I understand is if you don't have the symptoms of a disease, and it's not that you don't have them because you're on a medication, but you legitimately, your body is not producing those symptoms anymore. So if I were to go to a doctor today and say I was diagnosed with this, or not say anything, and he did a full checkup on me and checked everything and checked all my fluids and my liquids and my poops and all of that, there would be no sign of this disease. And so I start to question what that actually means, because if I were to move to a whole new place where no one knew who I was or knew my history, and I got a checkup, this disease wouldn't come up as something that I have.
Well, I wonder if you could call the 7 year mark, since you're 6 months away from getting your new insides, right? If
Maybe I'll be a completely different body by August 26th, or whenever it was I was diagnosed.
There
I
you
like
go.
that.
Maybe it's 5 years for cancer. Maybe it's 7 years for IBDers.
Anything, I'll take it. I like that.
Well, that's cool. No, and I mean, I completely relate to you. Like I said, I've just been on this path for about 2 years with undiet, I guess you could say, because I mean, I've read about SCD and paleo and all these other options, but in the end, I don't know. I don't feel like I want to restrict, you know, everything or try to follow a certain mean. So, and but otherwise we stick to 99% gluten free. I don't think we always get it out of there, but yeah, I mean, it's been tremendous results for myself. I mean, it's just helped me out, and I feel better now. My only problem is I go to CrossFit. If you're familiar with CrossFit, are you the workout?
Like, yeah.
So I'm wondering. I'm just curious. I don't know. I don't feel like it affects me. Am I raising my cortisol levels too high? Could I
I
be?
know you picked up on that comment. There's two sides to it. So when we're in a depleted state, or dealing with a flare up, or dealing with anything, a weakened immune system, when you have a cold, going out running will make you feel better because it releases endorphins. It'll make you feel better psychologically and probably in body, because we always feel better when we move a bit. But on a biochemical level, it might not be doing the best thing. The flip side of that, though, is going to CrossFit, or doing a workout that you really love. Well, one, it will nourish your soul, but it can reduce your stress. It helps release stress. So it's two parts of it. What I'm concerned more about is the people who run and do these high intensity workouts, but then will say that they can't do a restorative yoga class, or can't sit and meditate for even 5 minutes because their brain's spinning too much, or it makes them anxious. That's a sign that you're in that fight or flight, that stress mode chronically, and it's virtually impossible to heal, because we need to heal in that rest to digest when we're in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is, the autonomic nervous system is two branches. We're in parasympathetic, which is, the rest to digest, or the sympathetic, which is fight or flight. So if you have an inability to just be still and be quiet and be by yourself, or if you're, one of those types that has trouble falling asleep or has insomnia where you wake up at 4 in the morning, or you need that kind of rush, it can be an indication that you're, chronically in that fight or flight. And adrenaline is a very addictive substance, and it powers the workforce. So that is my concern with that. But if you can do the CrossFit, you can go for a run, but then you can also just, relax at the beach or read a book or just sit quietly and meditate or go to a restorative yoga or yin yoga or stretch class or whatever works for you. As long as you have that balance. The concern is when you have that inability to shut off and disconnect, and that creates an anxiety, is sort of a sign that you're not allowing your body to be in a state where it can heal.
Okay, good, because I would hate to have to give up CrossFit.
CrossFit.
And I feel it does soothe my soul. I mean, just coming from the Army, running whenever I was like, I don't want to run anymore, and it's. But I just found a happy medium with CrossFit. But I only do it 2 to 3 times a week, so it's not like I'm crazy 6 times a week going nuts.
I used to work out, and I worked in advertising. I was going to the gym at like 4:45 in the morning every day, which was crazy. Like it wasn't serving my health, and I learned my lesson.
There you go. Okay. Well, so did you started your cooking classes, and you might have mentioned this, and we covered a lot of ground, so I apologize if I'm backtracking here, but you started your 6 cooking classes, and then what I see behind you is what has formed out of that, and clearly you have you've packed a lot of Awesome Town into your website and into your kitchen. So did all of that stem from just trying to change your diet and from the Crohn's condition, or did you kind of have in the back of your mind? I know you went for fashion, you went to Africa to kind of do that whole thing, but was this the brainchild of your condition?
I mean, getting sick was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I came back from Africa and I worked in advertising for 3 years. I had, I think, 8 or 9 jobs in that span of time because I love job interviews. But I didn't love it. I mean, I learned a ton, and you've mentioned my website. Like, I learned a ton that has helped me with my business. The business I grew was based on a few things. One was that I never wanted to work 9 to 5, which is funny because now I work about, 9:30 till about 7, 7 days a week. But I didn't want to work a 9 to 5. I didn't want to be in an office setting. And when I was going through, after I got better, January 2007, I went to school for a year. It was a 1-year intensive, and then kept learning. I got out of school and was like, okay, I went to this program, but I didn't learn how to cook. So I taught myself to cook and realized that other people needed to learn how to cook. And just started, 1 class at a time and seeing how they filled. And it has evolved, and thank goodness it worked, because I don't know what I would have done if this plan hadn't worked. So yeah, I have been for the last 4 years teaching in-person classes a few times a week. A year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, we launched our certification course called To Become a Culinary Nutrition Expert. And what's really exciting is in September 2013, we're launching that completely online. So I will be teaching essentially every single thing I know about culinary nutrition and cooking, not just for gaining health, but for maintaining health, so that more people can teach us, because it's not out there. No one else is doing it. So the brainchild for my business was this desire that I was like, how did my doctor not tell me I could do this? How did nobody tell me that I could actually change my state of health? And passion is this force that I couldn't be stopped, and I would tell anyone who would listen what I was doing. And fortunately, some of my friends were more tolerant than others, and so they're still my friends, and some didn't want to hear about it. I never tell anyone what they should or shouldn't eat unless they ask me specifically, but people started coming, and what I really wanted was to create a community around food, around positive food culture, around eating good, real food, cooking from scratch. And what's amazing is that with my cooking classes, that we're taking a bit of a break from them right now, but when people come and they sit down at the table together after we've all been cooking, we eat family style, the pleasure, the simple pleasure that comes just from sharing a good meal that we cook together, it's always delicious and people always leave feeling amazing because I think part of it is what goes into it is not just, the excitement and the interest and the passion, but there's so much love that goes into it. And it's this process that people, again, they're looking for cheap, easy, and convenient, and there's no love in cheap, easy, and convenient.
No, and my wife's the same way. She loves to entertain and have dinner parties, and she makes everything from scratch. It's amazing. It blows my mind because, and every day I feel like I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world, probably next to your husband. So, uh, just to sit here and watch her do this, I mean, she goes through an hour and a half, or 2 hour process every night, and because she loves it. But everybody that leaves our house is just blown away. I mean, they especially being in Louisiana when they're used to hamburger helper and po' boys,
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, it's just that they I think they see a different side of that. We start to get a lot more questions from that. So,
That's
but really, just
sorry, that's the best way to introduce it to people too, is just give them food that's good.
you see my
Something
strobe
wrong?
light going?
Yeah,
It's raining really hard outside right now, and I think it's affecting my electricity.
that's funny. No, but when you can introduce people to good food by having them eat the good food, it does wonders, and that's when they will start to ask. But I also want to just clarify because I do work late most nights, and I go home. My husband has his own business too because he's running his private practice. His name is Josh Gatalis at joshgatalis.com, and we still manage to make really healthful, delicious meals in 20 minutes. Like there's obviously when you have guests for dinner, you put more time into it, but for just us, it's a non-negotiable the way that we eat, and it doesn't have to be super complicated or super elaborate. We just bought a slow cooker so we can like make our dinner in the morning and it cooks all day for us, which is nice. Um, but there's definitely ways to make it work with any kind of lifestyle and any kind of budget.
Okay. Two more questions, and I noticed Brendan Brazier was like one of your contributors or one of your helpers on your website. Does
Yeah.
he remind you of Lorenzo Lamas?
I don't know who you're asking. I know Brendan. I don't know who Lorenzo Lamas is.
Okay, well, whenever you get a chance sometime today, just Google Lorenzo Lamas
Okay.
and and see if that looks like Brendan.
Okay, I will. I trust that if you're asking me, he must.
Well, it
But
was just kind of it was one of those first reactions. It was he just looked like one of those, and I won't say anything. You make the determination yourself. That way, if you agree, then you'll have a great joke between the two of y'all.
okay.
And really, last question. Just your book came out today.
No, my book actually it comes out April 2nd.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Oh, you just got
I
your
got
copy today.
my copy. Yes, it was the first time I saw it, which is why I keep holding it up. It's really pretty. Yeah, it just came out. It comes out April 2nd, and it's already available in the States on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble as well for
Okay.
pre-order. And
And
it's
so, could you give it? It's cheap.
like I don't know, it's on sale for like $13. I don't know how they do that.
No. Well, just so could you just kind of give a brief synopsis? You said you have your story in there. Does it include recipes? Is it all recipes, or do you have some nutritionist uh, wisdom in there as well?
Of the above. So the book has my story. We question the paradigms of conventional nutritional wisdom, that idea that, the calorie is the dictator of health, which is silly. We talk about that, but then I do go into, the other 8 chapters are about how to live healthfully. So each chapter has everything from the importance of hydration to kicking the sugar cravings to the importance of eating at a table and setting time aside for mealtime and all of that. How to batch prep and prepare your produce and plan your meals, all the way through to how to eat and reduce the amount of waste, what you throw out each week. to the concept of natural body care, natural home care, and how we can reduce the chemicals and expenses of taking care of ourselves externally. And the last chapter is called Love What You Do and Do With Love, about finding the joy in, what we do every single day and the way that we live. Each chapter has recipes. So I think there's about 40 recipes in the whole thing. There's an 8-week transition program to start to adopt a lot of the tips that I give, plus a full 7-day meal plan. It's got it all.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely go on Amazon and pick up a copy.
Yay.
And hopefully, if I ever make it to Toronto, or we do, I should say, we make it to Toronto, and hopefully we can come to a cooking class and I can get an autograph.
That would be fantastic. Or maybe I can make it down to New Orleans on a book tour.
Hey, have you been to New Orleans before?
Not, but I do want to be there.
It's an awesome city. So,
I've,
but you do have to be selective on the restaurants you go to. That way, you get some good food.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. And so, just to close up, Meghan Telpner from MeghanTelpner.com.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to stop recording